Okay, let's talk about adrenal fatigue, one of my favourite topics, because I truly do believe that stress is one of those things that is probably inadvertently under our feet and under our noses, affecting a lot more people, particularly their quality of life, than we are appreciating. And unfortunately, allopathic or most standard doctors don't recognise such phenomena as adrenal fatigue, but it certainly is a truism. And what doctors do recognise are two extreme cases of adrenal fatigue, which is Cushing's and Addison's. One's underactive, one's overactive adrenals, but there are shades in between, which is a bit like the gluten story as well. You don't have to be a fully fledged celiac to have a problem with gluten. You can be quite sensitive to it. Same with dairy, same with everything else. So while we look for extremes in people's body, I think we're missing out on the majority, which actually have intolerances. And adrenal fatigue is one of those things. A lot of people are walking around subactive adrenal glands. And this is the little bit of why, and hopefully how you might be able to assist people to seek out the correct help. And you might be the one actually that helps them. So part of that is I see the adrenal glands as purely our stress glands. I want to talk about why that's so and what symptoms people can feel when their adrenals are under the pump and how you might be able to help people with it. So let's talk about stress, because primarily the adrenal glands secrete and make a lot of hormones. A lot. They make blood pressure ones, there's sugar ones, there's a stack, but the ones I really want to focus on, because I believe it's the primary cause, are the stress hormones. And so let's discover stress just a little bit more, probably through my eyes, as opposed to if I was standing in front of a group of biochemists talking about it. This is more a very functional, real, what happens in everyday life with stress. So it's a natural thing that happens, and our body has been designed, just reptilian part of our brain, that when it's under perceived threat, it will respond a certain way. And we've termed that, and this is medical, fight or flight response, which means you're going to giddy up and battle your way out of it, or you're going to take off and run out of there. It is an instinctual thing that will kick in when we feel under danger. But interesting, it doesn't have to be actual physical danger, it can be psychological danger. So I want to talk about that, because I believe that's where in our modern concrete jungles that we're going astray. So it's in all of us and it's quite unavoidable, but how we frame up what we choose to stress to is what is in our control. And it definitely saves our lives, and it would have saved your life multiple times and will continue to do so, because it kicks in and it augments a whole stack of processes, and you become way more alert to what's going on around you, and your thought processes fasten up, everything fastens up to get you out of harm's way. Now, if you drive a car and you're listening to this, no doubt it would have kicked in multiple times and prevented major car accidents. So it is fabulous. But if we're generating that response in our body just by thinking about a client that we've got booked in, or thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm running late to pick the kids up, then it can become a problem. Sorry, the little buildings can be a bit painful sometimes. Now, it's an innate survival mechanism designed to get us out of harm's way. So that's fabulous if there's a big fat bear jumping out of a cave, growling and gnarling its teeth and arms up in the air. Rah! We need to either punch it in the belly and take it down, or get out of there rapidly. So that's wonderful as a physical response to the stress. But we can get that by thinking, lying in bed, nice and relaxed, and thinking about thoughts. So people can do that to us. Situations can do that to us. So our thoughts are very dictative of where our physical self goes. So I spend a lot of time counselling people about, why do we have toxic thoughts? Why do we have stressful thoughts? Why do we entertain different scenarios that stress us when there's no need to? If we just bring ourselves to be a bit more in the now and just worry about the next minute, as opposed to the next, say, 20 hours or the next 6 weeks when there's a function coming up, and or a wedding. Weddings can be hugely stressful for people. Who am I going to bump into? There might be an ex there, or lots of different feelings can create a stress response. Situations, going into work, being interviewed, driving on a motor freeway in the rain. Those things can be highly stressful for people, and they don't need to be. Feelings of love. Well, love is actually the opposite feeling to feeling stress. So it's a good feeling to have, but feelings of pain, ambivalence, anger can elicit, definitely anger, will bring up a stress response in your body because it's getting ready to punch that person or to take off and get out of there. Pain's a huge driver of stress, and this is, excuse me, one thing I think that is overlooked by all of us is the fact that being in pain is the body's way of saying something's out of balance, and we override it. We'll either ignore it and plow through it, or we'll take Panadol, or we'll up our fish oils to try and mitigate the pain. Are we doing ourselves a service or a disservice? I don't know, because the body's clever. It gives us little warning signs that things are out of balance, and it guides us really well, except I think we get so preoccupied with the fluff around our lives that we forget to tap in to ourselves and use those guidance systems. So physical pain is one brilliant guidance system that we're doing something we shouldn't be doing, whether that's sitting the wrong way, eating the wrong foods, doing the wrong exercise. Pain is a good guidance system. And I've read research and studies that say up to 67 to 70% of people are in pain at any given point in time. That's across the population. That's probably indicative of Australians. You'll probably find that in tribal countries, I don't know, I haven't actually read research in those lands, but I imagine where they're a lot more happy and relaxed. They don't have anywhere near the pain. Might be neck pain, might be back pain, might be knee pain, hip pain. People suffer pain, and it pushes their stress catecholamines, hormones, up through the roof. This guy, medications can induce a stress response. Pseudoephedrine, any of the stimulants, beta blockers block the stress response, but certainly a lot of the others augment it and push it. Work for a lot of people. I mean, I've had a couple of people in this morning, and I'm going to share with you one of the tools I use with them, which is the traffic light system of approaching stress. Work for a lot of people is highly stressful, and that's because they don't know when to switch off. They're either self-employed and it just feels perpetual, or they're working for a boss they don't like, or they don't like their colleague, or they're under qualified for the job, or the job description's too broad, or there's multiple facets to work which are highly stressful for a lot of people. Foods. You might want to write some of these down. A lot of chemicals and food additives actually generate a stress response in the body. Anything that's a glutamate will do that. That stimulates the body. So any chemical number, monosodium glutamate, 621 up to 635. So they're all salts. Some of them are naturally occurring in food. So some foods are like seaweed actually have a lot of naturally occurring glutamates and can be quite stimulatory and can induce in children ADHD and behavioural issues. In grown-ups, it can make us quite irritable or give us headaches, and that's because it's generating or stimulating the stress cascade. Other foods or chemicals that I know that will do this are 412 and 415. They're the gums. And some of the colourings like 160A and 160B, which you'll find in butter and ice cream and yogurts and different things, will also or can stimulate a stress response in people and make them feel quite anxious. And certainly over the time in the Health Queen Clinic, I've had a lot of, actually I'm just thinking of them now, the girls that come to mind, but they'll have their yogurt at morning tea, and by lunchtime they're quite jittery and anxious, and that is a stress response, and it's been traced back. We've worked out it's been their food or something in their protein shake that they had after the gym in the morning. So excipients in protein shakes can also be quite dire in terms of causing a stress response, believe it or not. Now, people can be quite stressful. I don't know if I need to explain this one or not, but if you have a mother-in-law or a brother or a sister who's not coping with life, or just a parent, or your own kids or friends, they can create a lot of stress. And we often feel this immense connection that we've got to rescue them or save them or work ourselves around them. And that can be very stressful. I'm a huge fan of letting go of things and people who are not taking you forward in life and not taking closer to happiness. It's quite a powerful thing to do, and write down maybe just different friends, and I only ever try and maintain, I think of 10 people that I travel to the end of the planet for, or the end of the world for, and they're my highest priority, and that of course includes my 3 children. But if people start to give me icky feelings, or I feel stressed when I see them, and clients included, I'll let them go. I just naturally just let them go. And sometimes I have to sit down and put pen to paper and work out who those people are in my life, but I think it's a very powerful tool just to not to recognise that you can't please everyone, and some people will stress you, and it's okay to let them go. There's other ways to achieve what you want to achieve in life without them. Events. As I said before, marriages are extremely stressful for the participants who are getting married, but also everyone around them for some bizarre reason. Christmas time can be very stressful, Easter holidays. There's quite a few anniversaries of deaths. People can pump them up to be massive things that don't need to be. I've read on Facebook how a lot of people are, Mother's Day is really sad for them because they don't have the relationship with their mum that they thought they'd have and all this sort of stuff, and it's stressful for them. But, a lot of this stuff's by choice. Interesting, though, all of these things can generate stress in our body. And just on that, I think it's our perception to what's stressing us that makes us stressed, and you can reframe it very quickly, and that's where the real power lies in managing stress. Recognising what is potentially harmful to your physical being, and people can be, acting on it and removing yourself from it and using stress as a guidance system, but not becoming subservient to it, nor becoming addictive to it. And that's a really hard thing to do because stress can be quite addictive. Stress junkie. I thought the other day I can be a bit of a stress junkie and get off it, and that's because adrenaline and noradrenaline are highly addictive hormones. So physically what it does is it gets our physical and mental self ready to defend itself or to get out of there. And it'll go by various terms: fight or flight, or fight and fight response. Now, in acute stress, and it's interesting when I do my corporate chats for companies and I put this slide up, people go, oh my gosh, that is me. And a lot of people suffer with these things and don't share it, because why would I share with you that I've got, I have difficulties swallowing? Because, I don't know, it's just one of those things you don't share with people, I suppose. But headaches, that feeling faint or flushed, sometimes you feel kind of surreal, not like you're there, chew your nails. I used to, years ago, and I didn't realise this was what's happening actually till I put these slides together myself. I used to do a lot of presentations in front of pharmacists and grand rounds in hospitals. So there'd be, 100 doctors or 200 doctors in the room, and the pharmacists and all the registrars. And I'd be presenting pharmaceutical drug, a new drug, and I didn't realise it because I knew my stuff inside out and I was quite confident in that setting. But there was some stress because I used to scratch the back of my neck, and it was like I had a little bit of dog mange, and that was my little stress sign. So now I know, I haven't done it for ages, but now I know if I start fidgeting and scratching the back of my head, that I'm feeling uncomfortable and I'm stressed. We can get neck and shoulder tension, we can get racing heart, we can even get chest pains. And I know last year I went for a very stressful time with something, and I did at times think I was having a heart attack. I know I'm very healthy, all the rest of it, and I'm happy to share with you though that I worked out that it was stress and nothing actually physically going wrong. It was the psychological impact of stress. We can hyperventilate. There's a little man missing there. There are other symptoms, that I haven't put in here. One of the little people's missing. So they're the arousal things. It can make our legs shake, can make our hands shake. So I don't know if you've been to a funeral and had to give a eulogy, but you'll find that your throat and your voice won't work. Your hands will start shaking, and you think, what's going on here? My body's really letting me down, and that's acute stress. It shuts down the non-urgent things in your body, such as digestion. So it's not uncommon for people to get bloating, symptoms of irritable bowel, where they might feel butterflies, be on and off the toilet, or they'll get the opposite problem where they become constipated. They're definitely symptoms of stress. So let's talk about stress, because I do believe that it is killing people at a very rapid, insidious, under-detected rate. So if it, it is a physically life-saving phenomena that occurs in the body. And that's marvellous if you are in harm's way. We want it to kick in rapidly. We want to respond quickly. And by having extra sugar and a higher heart rate and that sort of thing, we can actually move quicker. But long term, it's not great, because it actually, I think anything more than 40% of 20 to 40% of the day up and down on the stress thing. But if you're spending half of your day in a stress state, that is not good. She looks quite concerned, doesn't she? Very unhappy, very burnt out, saggy under the eyes, really not coping, not happy Jan. So hormonally what happens is we squirt out this hormone here, cortisol, adrenaline and noradrenaline. And it stimulates our body to squirt out cortisol. So adrenaline and noradrenaline, we use them a lot in intensive care where I used to work. And the effects of those are milliseconds. So adrenaline you may have heard of. You can get EpiPens that are adrenaline. Adrenaline gives your body this massive surge in stimulation to defend itself. And it's a life-saving synthetic drug, but it's also a life-saving hormone that we naturally produce. It gets the liver and the spleen and the muscles to squirt out any sugar that they've got into the bloodstream. Actually, it's more your liver and your spleen that respond and squirt the sugar out. And because there's extra sugar in your bloodstream, it also, and cortisol's involved here, releases a bit of insulin, so you can carry that sugar into the cell muscles so you can run or kick someone and punch them if you need to. Now, in order to do that, because the heart is the pump that sends the blood around the body, your heart rate goes up. And these guys respond to receptor sites called alpha 1 and alpha 2 and beta 1, beta 2, and they're littered around the front of your heart and also through the blood vessel system. So those go off, they lock onto adrenergic receptors, and off goes your heart rate. Same with your blood pressure. It causes vasoconstriction, which means your blood vessels get a bit tighter and shrink in size, which increases the pressure through there because you've got the same blood flow going quicker through a smaller space, and that will increase the pressure through there, which is handy when you're trying to deliver sugar to the blood cells and the muscles very quickly. You'll also dilate your pupils so you can take in more information. Now, some of you may already be getting these aha moments. This is what happens when people take speed. This is what happens when people take amphetamines. This is what happens when people take lots of Red Bull and vodka. And this is what our little kids are starting, and not even just our little kids, this is what people are coming into hospital with when they've had too many stimulative drinks, drugs, coffee. They're shaking, they're jittery, and they're in full fright and flight response mode because adrenaline is zipping around. Now, I did say before, adrenaline is quite addictive. And if any of you have gone down a huge mountain top with lots of powder, you get that hook. It's thrilling. It makes you feel alive. It makes you feel invincible, just like jumping out of a plane, just like having a close football match, just like going into a boardroom and making some amazing changes. You'll get an adrenaline surge, and it is very addictive because you want more of it. So how do we know when it's becoming negative on your body? If you're suffering with high blood pressure, chances are you're going to have some degree of stress. Maybe 5-10% of blood pressure is tracked back to kidney disease and other diseases, but majority of it will go down as idiopathic, which means no physical cause found. Well, yes, there is stress, but doctors don't acknowledge it. Well, they do acknowledge stress has an impact on your body, but they'd never say really to someone, "Oh, this is causing your high blood pressure." I'll keep my lips sealed. High cholesterol. So just going back to this hormone cortisol, one of its roles is to go up to the liver and say to the liver, "Hey, make heaps of cholesterol because maybe we're going to lose an arm or a leg." Or cortisol also helps make all the other hormones. So our cholesterol can go up as a consequence of being under stress. In fact, when I was in the industry of pharmaceuticals selling cholesterol drugs, and I also for 2 years did audits, what I found is that, and I've read lots of research on cholesterol because I do love cardiovascular disease. What I did find is that there's a high correlation between high cholesterol and stressy people. So we have to move away from the fact that high cholesterol is all bad diet and being overweight, because it's not. Majority of the people, there's a lot of stress involved that pushes up their cholesterol, and that's because cortisol tells their body to make more cholesterol. We all have the capacity to make cholesterol. We're making it every day, and if you're under stress, you'll make a lot more of it. Rapid heart rate, because that's the adrenaline, noradrenaline effects, and palpitation. So people who feel, who have AF or SVTs and things might have too much of this unchecked going on. Insulin problems, definitely. So people who have high stress will often distribute fat around their belly. And one of the biggest no-nos, and if I forget to mention it, I want to mention it now because it's probably the biggest take-home grab I'll tell you about this whole recording. And that's get your clients to never ever eat while they're stressed. So you have to be relaxed. in order for your stomach acids to switch on and for digestion to switch on, because remember, the body deems that a non-urgent function, so it'll switch off when your brain's on. So just say to them, if your brain's active, then your gut's off. Just dampen down your brain thought patterns and what you're stimulating through your eyes. So no reading emails, no watching nasty TV, not even reading the paper. We need to focus on our food, feel relaxed, feel happy, and activate our gut so all the enzymes can kick in and do what they need to do, which is digest food, and then it won't plant it around your belly. Can lead to constipation because the gut's off and we'll shove food in there. It goes, oh, I can't deal with this, I'm just going to deal with this later, and it slows the whole system down. And definitely urine retention. So people who tell you that they get bloating mid-afternoon will often be scoffing down their lunch, not focused on their lunch, probably answering emails and working through their lunch break while they eat. Or I'll show you a picture soon, and I've probably used her a few times, but the eating on the run thing is really bad. So, left untreated, all these diseases in my mind, even though as a naturopath I can't say that I can help people with them, but I certainly can as a nurse, and so can you, help these people with have these diseases. But these to me, stress because it's an insulin problem, stress because it's adrenaline and cortisol problem, stress because it's leading to damage from noradrenaline and adrenaline, stress totally. This one here, very interesting. Yes, foods irritate our bowel, but so does stress. And you see more and more of these people walking around town. Interesting. It's not just the physical things we have to contend with. Psychologically, stress will affect our relationships because we forget and lose the capacity to relax. And I don't know about you, but I don't like hanging around with stressed people. They create this energy and this trail of destruction around them, and it's not fun. Good outcomes are rare, and it just makes you feel on guard and edgy, and that's not really pleasurable. Other things that will come from bad stress, long-term depression, anxiety, totally. And we start avoiding things, particularly if it is deemed a stressful thing, like going out socially. If we find that stressful, we'll start avoiding social interaction, and that's quite harmful because as human species we do need social interaction to feel good. It's one of our greater needs. High stress can, particularly if it's generated by the thing you're trying to do, like sport or work or being a parent, if that creates more stress, we'll want to avoid it, and it will bring very low satisfaction from that particular role or hat that we're playing, and that's sad. People can get panic attacks too, and poor self-esteem, it just starts to dip off. So these are just some things. I've put 3 slides together here of 3 diseases that I believe, or conditions that I believe, are induced by unchecked stress. So yes, it's okay to have stress that is appropriate. So driving along the freeway, someone or something bounces off the back of a ute in front of you. Whoa, you want stress to kick in quickly so you can respond rapidly, make some very quick split-second decisions, and get your body out of that environment. However, if you're feeling stressed because there's a wedding coming up and you're feeling stressed all the time, or you've got to see the in-laws this weekend and your body's in an overdrive state all that time, it will lead to these sorts of things. It will lead to burnout. Interesting, allopathic or Western medicine doesn't acknowledge these shades of grey, and for me, majority of people have their health issues coming because of these shades of grey. So adrenal fatigue is when those little adrenal glands, which sit above your kidneys that make those stress hormones, like a bicep that's overworked, initially it'll strengthen up, but if you just don't give it a rest and you keep doing bicep curls, it's going to actually deplete the muscle and fatigue it. Same thing happens with your adrenals. They can produce stress hormones quite nicely for an extended period of time, and then they just go, I got nothing. And they will shut down and they will shrink and atrophy. A good example, actually extreme example, but a good example of that is someone who's a carer and looking after someone who's dying of cancer. They will be amazing. Their body rises to the occasion. They'll nurse that person for a year or 2 years. The person dies, and then boom, they fall into this massive bucket and suffer chronic fatigue. And that's because we can mount to the occasion short term. Long term, though, it's just diabolical on our body. So adrenal fatigue, you may have heard it called burnout. Medically, they do recognise fibromyalgia, which is achy joints and achy fingers and heavy muscles and this chronic fatigue. I see it very much through, until proven otherwise, it's adrenal burnout, low cortisol states. Now, apart from stress causing this, one other area I have noticed, and this is just observational, is people who have had glandular fever or Epstein-Barr virus or EBV or mononucleosis during their teen years. I often find they have a very low threshold for burnout. And that would probably go for any virus, Ross River virus, Brahmi forest. I do find if people have had a big viral attack, I don't know what happens physiologically, so as I said, this is observational, but their adrenal glands seem to be quite heavily implicated, and they have a very fine safety net of how much they can flog their body to when they burn out. Body aches are the key thing, so you get quite sore fingers, and there's no arthritis, it's just this ache. Muscles feel heavy, sore, tendons can be achy. People will tell you they wake up tired despite how much sleep they've had. And they've just got this, they just want to keep sleeping in, but it makes no difference. Often they'll want an afternoon nap, and they will tell you, and then they get this glazed over feeling if you look at 2 o'clock, and I just need to sleep. I could fall asleep right now. That can be burnout. Interesting, poor sleep, and I haven't done a graph here, so I'll just use the cursor arrow here. But what happens with cortisol, which is one of the stress hormones, is it kicks in the morning, starts to go up, and it responds to light changes. So as the sun comes up, it stimulates part of the back of our eyes, which then tells our adrenal glands to become active. So cortisol goes up, reaches its peak around 10, 12 o'clock in the morning, and starts to drop off. And by 8 o'clock at night, it should be quite low. At that point, melatonin, which is our sleep hormone, should kick in, make us sleepy. It peaks about 1 o'clock and should drop off. Now, if people are in adrenal fatigue state, what happens with their cortisol is this. It doesn't really peak, it just kind of goes blip, and then it's flatline. And because there's not this massive drop-off, you don't get melatonin kicking in. So it's not uncommon for people with burnout to have sleep issues. And it's because they're not getting this beautiful rise in melatonin. You can get more infections, and that's also related to cortisol, because one of the primary roles of cortisol is to get the body ready for infections and produce inflammatory markers so it can defend itself from bacteria and viruses. So multiple infections in people can be a sign that they've burnt out, and they'll pick up everything. Low energy levels are key. They can get flat moods, they can get irritable, and that's just because they haven't got enough tenacity to deal with the issue. It's just like, oh my gosh, really? I'm just overwhelmed. Even though they physically might be exhausted, they might be suffering with this inability to dampen down their thoughts. And a classic one is actually they get a pain or a headache behind the eyes. I didn't put it here, but they can also crave licorice or sugar. And that's because they'll get a little spike from licorice. Licorice is actually a herb or a plant that we use for adrenals. But sugar will just give them a little pickup, and they'll be craving these little stimulation because their body has just naturally lost the ability to do it. So I've grouped in thyroid issues here because often my experience is, and I've been in the trade for 11 years in natural medicine, and I used to, maybe 8 years ago I started, once you start looking for thyroid disease and underactive thyroids, you find it everywhere. But interesting, I found by not treating people's thyroids but helping them manage stress, their thyroids improve. And this is a metaphor or analogy I use, and it's not totally squeaky medically accurate, but it is how it makes sense to people when they hear it, and it'll probably make sense to you. So I say the adrenal glands are like the mum, and she wakes up in the morning and she puts a phone call through to the daughter, who's the thyroid. Come on, sweetie, it's time to get out of bed. It's a beautiful day. Let's go. And the thyroid does its thing. But if mum's exhausted and she sleeps in, or she just forgets to make the phone call because she's had it, she's just overwhelmed and kaput, i.e. too much stress, she won't make the phone call, and the thyroid forgets to respond, and you end up with an underactive thyroid. So usually I will treat people's adrenal glands before their thyroid. If they're on thyroxine and other, they've got true declared thyroid issues, I will make sure they've got all their cofactors. And there's quite a few cofactors: zinc, iodine, vitamin D, progesterone, iron, B6, zinc, selenium. Might have said that twice. If I said progesterone, CoQ10. There's quite a few cofactors that people need in order to convert their thyroid hormones. So I will go in at that level and make sure that their macro and micronutrients are up to par. But usually I find by helping people with adrenal fatigue that the thyroid will bounce up. But these are some classic symptoms of an underactive thyroid. And I do believe at various times, if we're highly driven, highly working people, that our thyroid can sometimes grumble and become underactive, but we can pick it up again. So people with underactive thyroids experience, and I'm not talking about overactive here, that's a totally different kettle of fish. But underactive thyroids, people will get low energy levels. They'll have low moods and they'll gain weight. Their skin might be a bit dry or itchy. They can have altered bowel movements. Interesting, not everyone needs all these symptoms, by the way, to have an underactive thyroid. But the eyebrow starts to shorten up. So you'll find that they don't have big bushy eyebrows that go all the way down to, the top of the cheekbone. It shouldn't be that big, but you know what I mean. It starts to shorten up. They can get pain around, the thyroid sits just below the voice box, so they can have pain when they swallow and feel like they've got a pea or something stuck in their throat, or cough after eating. And some people, I guess I've become quite attuned to this. If they sit down and they've got a bit of fat pad around their lower throat, I'll often start suspecting they've got a thyroid issue. And I've also grouped this in there because, once again, I see this as a stress problem and poor eating, and eating while stressed. Diabetes can take a long time to diagnose, and they'll have a lot of those symptoms I talked about before. Classic is low energy levels, or energy levels that swing and respond nicely to sugar, and they tend to crave sugar. They can get low moods. Infections, typically they start to present with boils on their bum or ingrown hair follicles, so the staph levels go up. Staph loves sugar, absolutely loves it. So they might present with rashes or infections, and they can have poor sleep, and typically a person with an unchecked blood sugar level will wake up between 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning, and that's because their last meal is usually around about 7 o'clock. Blood sugar will go up and it will drop off in their sleep, and you can't stay asleep if you've got a low blood sugar level, and so for most people that'll wake them about 1 o'clock typically, and they'll say, lay awake for an hour, and I'm like, that's because you had a low blood sugar. Some people innately will just get up and go to the fridge and eat something or drink something, and that will balance their blood sugar, and they'll go back off to sleep. But that's one of those subtler signs that that's going on. So yes, I'm a big foodie through and through, and I just don't think we love food enough. I think we fear it too much, and it really will help with this particular issue of stress, as will time management. So I'll just talk a little bit about nutrition and food now, and the power of how we eat and what we're doing when we eat. And this darling lady is kind of indicative of what a lot of us are doing, and that's thinking that we've just got to tick a box, eat, move to our next venture, because more is better. Faster, quicker, smoother, lined car seats is really, we've got in our head that that's the symbolism of being successful, but it's not. It's the symbolism of we're going down that stress path, and our health is going to be put behind our materialism goals, and that's not good, because that's when we end up sick. We can't even enjoy all this stuff that we've worked hard for. So stress tends to make us gobble our food, like this young lady on the right here. We just shove it in. None of this chewing 20 times, which is actually quite important, to masticate and chew your food down so you can absorb nutrients out of it. So mindless eating. We hoe it in. We're not concentrated on our food. So the hormones that are needed and the stretch receptors in our gut don't have time to take the message back up to the brain, to the appetite center, and say, hey, you're full. So a lot of us overeat. That majority of people will overeat to some degree, and some people undereat. There's a lot of emotional eating that goes on when we're stressed because, very interesting fact, sugar drops cortisol momentarily. So chocolate probably does make us feel a bit calmer, and that's because high sugar will drop cortisol. So we can tend to gravitate to sugary foods. And stressed eating, well, that's just, oh my God, I'm so stressed, I'm a rubber band, I'm just going to the cupboard and I'm going to shove my mouth full of food, and somehow, on some level, that makes us feel less stressed, but it doesn't. It just gives us another issue to contend with, which is the scales. So sugar, I've just put these in because of the diabetics mentioned before, but sugar's everywhere, and it dramatically affects our insulin levels and can contribute to more stress on the body, because sugar's very stimulatory. And I've put these slides in other things as well, but it's one of my favourite because it explains where this hooking on refined sugar came from, and that's through the 50s when there were food shortages post-war days, and sugar is one of those things that was quick to grow, easy to grow, and it gave people energy and calories, so we thought it was a good thing. But now it's white poison. Now it's interesting. Mice, there's a great book, and I think it is called White Poison, or Sweet Poison it's called, and I've forgotten the author's name, but get it if you're interested in it. He's done a great job at demonstrating sugar and how addictive it is and how we're insidiously hooked on it. And rats and mice will go to sugar over cocaine once they've had it once. That's how pleasurable and addictive sugar can be. And getting people off sugar is harder than getting them off cocaine and heroin. So I've got a couple of bonus recordings there about blood sugar levels, but essentially if we ride with a high blood sugar level, we can initially become a bit hyperactive, a bit irritable, we can get a bit anxious with it, cranky or annoyed. Children just become massively hyperactive, and if you've never seen this phenomena, go and find someone else's child, give them a can of Coke and see what happens in 30 minutes. They'll be off the wall. High blood sugar levels can make us quite sleepy, and we make fat when our blood sugars are up. Low blood sugar levels, and as I said, I'm just putting a slide in here because it matches up with the diabetes mentioned before. Low blood sugar levels can make us quite flat and depressed and apathetic, so we can't be bothered doing anything. It can give us all these other hypo signs, which are headaches, vision problems, cravings for more stimulants because our body wants our blood sugar level to bounce up. Now, I'll refer you now to those 2 recordings that come under the bonus section to read more about that and the power of food, because really if we're gravitating towards carbs and your clients are eating lots of carbs because it gives them energy because they're adrenally fatigued, and they end up doing this with their blood sugar, they swing. And after 20 years of going up and down, insulin in, dropping down, I'm low again, so I need more sugar and I need blah, 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 and they do all this. After about 20 years of that, their pancreas just goes, I can't do this anymore. How about you get called a diabetic? And that's what happens. So the best way to balance out blood sugars and the sugar craving that we get when we're adrenally fatigued is to toss in some proteins. So I do have a number 1 rule, and that's to only eat carbohydrates with a protein. And we've also got to gravitate people away from white stuff. And there's some bickies there, what a bad slide. Back to, I think they were spelt biscuits, back to these guys. So that there's enough sugar in apples, there's enough sugar in tomatoes. We will still get sugar from these foods and beetroot, but it's in a lot better format. It's apart from the apples, the others aren't fructose sugars. They're much better sugars for our body, and we'll get enough energy just from those carbs there. Now, this is where the true benefit in helping people with stress lie, and some of these slides you might want to stop the recording. I do, as I said, I'm bringing out the, and might be out by the time you get around to listening to this, the Happy Female Formula and the 8-week program that I've got together for balancing hormones. And a lot of the stuff I look at there, the psychological stuff, is really, if we haven't worked it out, and a lot of us haven't, or we might have known when we were 18 what we wanted to achieve in our life, and then life gets in the way of life in a way, we kind of get consumed by our careers and our children, and we often don't revisit what we want out of this life. And you'll hit your 40s and sometimes 60s and go, oh my gosh, time is finite and I haven't achieved, or I'm not working within what I really think are valuable to me. So I find these activities for people really quite soul defining and helps them say no to what's stressing them. So it's quite important that we coach people through these exercises. And this is one, and you can come up with your own forms, or I might even put in the bonus section actually some of these other tools that I use. But I get people to take this away and say, go and have a juice in a coffee shop and write down what your values are. Because if you know that, then you know what you can say no to. Because people are too scared to say no. They're too scared to say no in case they miss out on an opportunity. They're too scared to say no in case they offend somebody. They're too scared to say no to stuff because they actually don't know what they want and what makes them happy, and they've forgotten what their values are. So if you're very clear on what your values are, it's much easier to give yourself permission to say no to certain things that come along. An example of a value is, like one of my values is to have happy and healthy children. That to me, and that's what I aspire for every day. And my children are happy and they're very healthy, and I just feel so complete just from that one value alone. Being authentic. So you'll find, and when you hear me present and when you hear me do these things, I'm not going to BS you and say that I'm perfect at anything, because that's not being truly authentic. And one of my greater values is that you understand that I want people to understand that anything that I do in life I can achieve, and I believe it's emulable, like it is doable. I don't want to have some vision and people think that I'm squeaky clean, because I'm not. So being authentic is one of my higher values. Being honest is a very high value for me. Being in the now and giving you my total attention is very high value for me. Helping other people who don't have as much is something that has just been born with me, and just tends to lend me down that charitable side of life. And we've all got very different values. They're not right and they're not wrong. They are your own personal set. And if you yourself have never done this activity, it's a really good thing to do. Write down what your values are, what's important to you, and what do you believe is right and wrong. As I said, it's not about how they match up with mine or anybody else's. They're your set of blueprint values. So then it can, and I will give you permission, because I know a lot of you won't have this capacity yet, but I give you permission now to say no to things that don't make you feel good. I want you to start saying no. And look, my girlfriend, who passed away actually when she was only 42, but she taught me this lesson quite a few years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, and she said, Sam, you've got to start saying no. And it wasn't a word that I was using in my vocabulary much at all, but I think we should use no as much as we say yes. So it should be weighted equally. They're opposite. So just like you have day and night, you need to have yes and no in your life. By being able for you to be able to say no, you'll start doing stuff that you really want out of life. I want you to start saying no to things that you don't really want to do. And that might be going to someone's barbecue. Just say, look, initially what you start doing is going no, and there's an excuse, or no, there's a reason. And after a while you just start going, nah. I've had and I won't tell you that example because it makes me sound callous, and you do feel a bit callous sometimes, but you've got to be true to yourself first. So saying no means less stress. Because if you say yes and you're doing something that's against your values, it will have a more of a backlash, and it'll put you into a stress state. And truly, I just think avoiding stress and putting yourself in stressful situations is quite critical to having optimal health. So I encourage you and urge you to start saying yes to great opportunities, to things that make you feel good. Sometimes people feel like they've got to punish themselves in order to get a reward. No, that's just rubbish. Say yes to the stuff now and do more of it. If it's making you feel good, you'll be a much better person, and every single person around you will benefit from that. Say yes to things that take you to your higher self. You know, that little trip to Bali, that yoga retreat that's $800, say yes to it. Because it's going to bring out those qualities in yourself that are taking you to a more evolved, beautiful, relaxed human. And say yes to things that benefit you and your values. And don't feel guilty for saying yes. Say yes, thank you. Pen and paper time, folks. I just had a little drink of water because this is one of these concepts that when I present it to groups, you see people going, oh my gosh, this makes sense. The introduction to this is a little bit bumpy, so bear with me. I'm even coughing as I clear my throat to tell you what I believe is, well, I call it the Health Queen traffic light way of managing stress. And it is about having more fun and releasing the opposite hormones, which are oxytocin. And I haven't included in the hormone set testosterone, which I really should have, because testosterone, particularly for women, is a stress hormone, no doubt about it. And testosterone makes us aggressive, competitive. It releases sugar, so there's a lot of blood sugar problems with it. It puts tummy fat on. It can switch off our ovaries. And when it's managed by the medical faculty, high testosterone women's a syndrome called polycystic ovary syndrome. They manage it as diabetes, so they put you on metformin, which is diabetic medication. I do a similar thing. I manage it, as I said, with great eating. So protein plus carb, never sugars on their own or carbs on their own. Working out what their values are, and then some time management. And that's what this is about. So we're all given 24 hours in a day, and assuming you're going to live for the next 24 hours, you've got 60 chunks, 60 minutes, and you've got 24 of them. And the game of life really is, I believe, to turn those into fun or love or something really pleasurable as opposed to something negative. Now, we're very good, and women are particularly good at this, and that's putting in a whole stack of rules that you've got to tick box first, and then you'll allow yourself to have the fun. And we're forgetting that the essence of life is to have fun, or the game of life. We're just focused on the rules of life. So if we return to the essence of life, and if that's to have fun or to feel pleasurable or to add pleasure to people's lives, then this makes a lot of sense. You've got 24, 60 minutes in each day. And whether you're aware of it or not, you are allocating that time to something, to someone. It might be 12 o'clock and you're listening to this recording, and you would have already had 4 or 5 hours awake, and you would have consciously or unconsciously allocated those 6 hours, 6 hours, yes, to something. And some of them would have been very pleasurable for you, some of them wouldn't have been. So this just brings in a bit of mindfulness about how we're allocating our time and our energy and our love, because it is capped. Oops, that would be my dog. Sorry about that. Her name's Honey. Anyway, what I want to do is talk about red light activities. So red light activities are things that, so as you can see there with the traffic light system, just a second. Can you pick her up, please? Thanks. See, I'm real. These recordings are real. Because I've had problems storing it on my storage thing, I've probably done this presentation so many times, so I'm just going to push through, and I'm very sorry about that little interim with my dog. Anyway, I believe that time and the 60 minutes can be categorised as red light, amber and green light activities. Now, red light activities, they take up that 60 minutes. They go, yep, I'll have that 60 minutes, but they don't give you much back in return. In fact, they don't give anything back in return. They take your energy, they take up that time, and they can make you a little bit resentful and a little bit jaded. Now, a good example of these are doctor's appointments. When you go in and you sit there for an hour and a half and you get nothing back. You might read some trashy magazine, but it's really not a good exchange of that 60 minutes or 90 minutes if it's an hour and a half. Cleaning for some people's red light. And I usually brainstorm this with people because perception of red lights are quite different for each person. Some people enjoy cleaning, so it's probably an amber. I'd be very surprised if it's a green, because we'll talk about those shortly. When I have to ring about my mobile phone to my telecom company, I get quite aggro, and that to me is a total red light activity. It makes me feel angry, it takes up an hour of my life, and I don't have anything to show for it. Paying bills, watching sitcoms, game shows, school pickups, a lot of those things can be deemed red light activity. And look, I had a professional in this morning, and she felt most of her work life was red light. It was very draining. She felt she had to do it because she has to make money, and it was making her very resentful. So it was becoming a total red light. I have had another lady actually who, very well off, but she just felt her life was a series of red lights as well, because all she was doing was making lunches for the kids, dropping them to school, which was an hour away, an hour drive home, same in the afternoon, cleaning up their mess, ironing the clothes, yada, yada, yada. Everything was red light. And they make us really unhappy, as well as steal our time and make us tired. So my advice with red lights is you stop doing them, because a lot of them don't have to be done. You either reduce the time that you do them, or you do it a different way, so you pay bills online or troubleshoot through emails, or you outsource them. A lot of the things we do, we can outsource. And I know everyone thinks you need money to get a cleaner or to get your ironing done, but you can trade time or trade services. It doesn't always have to incur money. Double them up, shortcut them, give them up. Just try and critique your life, and if you need to do this activity, monitor the next week or reflect on your last week, how you allocated your time, and go through with a red highlighter, an orange highlighter and a yellow, green, and work out what activities were red. I try and have 0 red in my life. Even like yesterday, I caught the planes down, caught a plane. I converted that to fun. I talk to people, I do work on the computer, I write blogs, and I try and make it at least an amber. And that's a good idea if you try and convert these to amber. So amber are okay, but you've got to watch them because they can actually become red, but they're a reasonable exchange of energy and time and love, and they're really important for connection. Most of your waking time should be spent in amber. Family barbecues, watching documentaries on telly. Some people, Facebook's an interesting one. Facebook can be green light and make people feel incredibly connected. Others it's amber, but for some it's red. For some people they're getting hooked on Facebook. It's probably more addictive than sugar. I've got to do a study on that. And they're losing chunks of time for very little reward. online activities going out, they should all be amber. Now, green light is amazing, and this is a concept that makes a lot of sense to people. So you invest 60 minutes. You get that 60 minutes back, and you also get another 30 minutes to spend somewhere else. So I love green lights. Now, green light, an example of a green light that you'll immediately be able to recognise is yoga. So let's say you do 60 minutes of yoga. Your hormones balance. It's quite nice. You get to relax. You can daydream. And if you do it really well, it's very restorative for the body. And what it does, even though you only spend 60 minutes on it, it means that you need less sleep. It's been proven time again. People who do yoga need less sleep. It also means you have greater clarity. So when you go to work, what might have been a project might have been about to take up 2 hours will only take up 40 minutes because you're in the zone. So green light activities, when you're doing them, you actually lose your soul, you just lose your mind, you lose time, and you're just totally in flow. And it balances your hormones remarkably, and it gives you time to spend on other things. Now, the who's who in the zoo in the world, the Bransons and the like, they do a lot of green light activities, and they don't necessarily take money. They just take awareness. I try and do two a day. Some days I get 3 or 4 in, and I love that. So things are yoga, meditation, and this varies for different people. Look, sex is a classic. Some people, sex is a green light activity. For others, it's a red light activity. So it's a perception, it's a values matching of how people are allocating their time. And it's not about what we think they should be spending their time on, although it would be good to have some form of activity in the green light section, but not everyone finds activity green light. But if we can encourage them to harness the concepts of green light, then it makes them feel great, then it's probably just as beneficial as exercise. Doing art, painting, I love my painting, scrapbooking, walking, outdoor stuff with nature, journaling for some people. I've got a lot of patients, and the favourite thing for them is reading a book in the sun and just sitting there with their feet up, and they lose themselves in a book. And that's fantastic, and I highly encourage it. Gardening, appointment with health coaches, massages, seminars, and personal development. So what you're doing now is probably a green light, believe it or not. So, those 2 people I cited before with the red light being work and family, they weren't doing any green light. Actually, one of the girls was doing yoga once a week. So I said to her, and I encouraged her, I want you to do 3 green lights a week. And she looked at me and I said, I give you permission. So now she's going to factor in 3 green lights. She goes, what, can I go for a walk? I'm like, yes. What's the 3rd thing? And for her, interesting enough, I haven't had anyone say this, but for her, getting her hair done by a hairdresser was just the bee's knees. So she's going to do that now every week. Just get her hair done on a Friday, just get it blow dried, because she just totally loves it. And she said it helps her regroup, and I could just see from the way she was talking about it, it was a total green light. So green lights are things that really make you regroup as a human, make you feel special and loved, and it drops your stress hormones. And that's what we've got to do for these people with adrenal fatigue. If you're a bit more advanced, I urge you to have 1 to 2 a day. And if you're a yoga teacher, it may be in amber. So just be careful what a green light is. Remember, it's got to give you back some love and time and energy. This is an interesting thing too. I don't know if I had watching comedy on the green lights, but that's one of my green lights. And children laugh 200 times a day, and as soon as you laugh, you circuit break all your stress hormones. For some crazy reason, by the time we're grown-ups and we're taking the world really seriously, we don't let ourselves laugh anymore, we don't have frivolity, and our hormones will stay up. So laughing is really important. The other thing I notice people grapple with stress is that they think high, and I call them up activities, and down activities. So if you're adrenally fatigued, you don't want to be doing stacks of up activities, which are, high intensity exercise, high intensity anything. You want to balance. You want a couple of high intensities, but also some very down green light activities to get your hormones back in balance so your adrenals can recoup and then you can charge forward again. And that's it. I hope you found that interesting. Put any comments on the Facebook page, and yes, looking forward to your feedback.